Hi friends, excuse my redness. It is extremely warm in this apartment. It's like living in a greenhouse. Anyway, hi friends, my name is Heidi from @booksandcables on both Instagram and Ravelry, and this is hopefully the first episode of my podcast / vlog. I've been playing around with this idea for a very long time because I wanted to have a more longer platform to discuss my knitting, but I had a few concerns in that I didn't know what I could contribute that was different than what already exists because there's so many knitting and podcasts out there. And also, I didn't think it was necessarily manageable when I worked a full-time job and I spent most of my extra time knitting. So I've decided to compromise. I'm going to do this podcast in a daily vlog style where I film a segment where I talk about things every single day, and I feel like that would be a little bit more suitable also for the way I think, because I think that the format where I talk about all of my work in progress, all of my finished objects, all of my yarn, I feel like that's a little bit too linear, and sometimes a project that I have kind of brings up memories and different stories, depending on where I was knitting on it and where I bought the yarn. So I feel like doing this format would be a little bit more conducive to what I want to talk about. So for today, this is just a quick introduction. It is Saturday, September 15th, I think. And so I'm just going to talk about what my goals are for the week, and also this cardigan, which I finished last week. So my big goals for the week is to, number one, make some progress in this birds of a feather shawl. Now, if you follow me on Instagram, you know that this is not really in my style, but I really like the idea of mixing two different bases together. So I really want to make a dent in that. And also this week, I would like to finish my Stockholm sweater, which is another Mohair incorporated sweater. I have the body done and I started one of the sleeves. So I still have to do the collar and the other sleeve. And I'm just looking down at my notes here. And another thing that I started, well, I did the rib last week, but I did the bulk of the knitting for the color work today, and I want to get this done with a pom included also by this week on my Babel hat. And then finally, if I am very, very good, this is kind of a reach goal. I want to do the sleeves on this Silver Forest sweater. I'm going to go into a little bit more detail about each of those projects when I talk about them later this week. Well, for you, it's in the next few minutes. And, but yeah, I just wanted to talk about that quickly for now. So I'm going to go on to talk to you about this Galloway cardigan. So this is the Galloway by Jared Flood of Brooklyn Tweed, and I finished this last week ahead of going to the Elmont Fiber Festival. So I consider this my Montreal sweater. So at the beginning of August, I went to Montreal for the first time in about 4 years, and I picked out the yarn for this sweater. It's made in Brooklyn Tweed Loft. I did it in the probably either the large or extra large size, around 43 inches bust size. I should probably have these project details pulled up, but it's on my Ravelry page if you care to check it out. But this is a cardigan which is knit in the round, and then you do very steep decreases up here, and then when it's all connected, you do a steek up the middle, and you cut your knitting in the middle, and then you pick up the button band. I decided not to insert any buttons, so I just did a regular rib band, And this was a very frustrating sweater to do because for some reason my brain could not wrap itself around all of the different instructions for decreases at the same time, because you have to decrease at the same time in the middle, and also for the raglan. And the raglan started off as one decrease here and here. No, one decrease only in the inside of the raglan, and then you started doing it on both sides of the raglan. And I messed it up. I had to rip it back 4 times. I initially had planned to have it done 2 weeks ago. Instead, I finished it last week, but all good. Now it's done. I was originally gonna wear it, but it is stinking hot right now in Ottawa. So I can just feel the heat emanating off of it behind me instead. So I know that was quick, but I'm going to call that it for today, and I'll see you guys tomorrow, but in 2 seconds for you. Okay, bye. Hi, I'm back again. So I realized as I was watching the last clip I filmed, I didn't actually explain a lot of the story behind the sweater. So the reason why it's called my Montreal sweater is because I had bought it from Isabell, which I went to for the first time also at the beginning of August during that trip. And what was really exciting was that when I was picking out the yarn, I stood there for a freaking long time, and everyone who worked there was very patient with me. And actually I met Fred, who who apparently followed me on Instagram, which was very exciting, and we were talking about the color that she was going to use for one of her sweaters. So I was there for a while and I went back and forth. Originally I was gonna make Diana Walla's design, which is escaping my brain right now. I'll put a picture of it if I remember to. But they didn't have the colors I wanted, and so I decided to instead do the Galloway sweater, and then because they had all the colors, and I've been thinking about doing it for a while. And as I went up to check out, so it's a funny story. Basically, it required such a quantity of yarn. I basically gave them a list of what I wanted, and they, 2 lovely ladies there helped me pick it out. And actually I had, because of this rather large project that I wanted, a line had formed behind me, and as I was paying, a woman said, "Wow, I've never seen anyone buy so much yarn at once." And I was like, I need to reconsider my life here, for 2 seconds, and then I quickly moved on and paid the money. The funny part about that story is the week following, I was working on the sweater at Twist Fiber Festival, which was in Saint Andre Avalon. I'm not very good at French. And they had a podcast truck where they were interviewing different designers and podcasters and people in the knitting world. And I sat down and I saw a girl being interviewed in the truck, and then someone says, "Oh, that's Diana Walla," and then I was like, "No, that's the girl who picked out my yarn for me at Isabell." So funny enough, I actually met one of my favorite designers without realizing it, and she helped me pick out the yarn for my Galloway sweater. So this sweater, even though it was a pain in the butt, actually came with an interesting backstory to it, and we had a lovely chat after. She's really nice, and I was telling her that one of my first colorwork sweaters was by her, which I can't really remember the name of right now, but I gave it to my mom. So I showed her a picture of my mom wearing it, which is, in retrospect, maybe a little bit strange and kind of fangirly, but yeah, I just really like her. So anyway, that's it for today. Thank you for following along. Happy Sunday. I'm back today to talk to you about the 2 projects I said that I wanted to make either finish or make a significant dent in, which is my Stockholm sweater and also my birds of a feather shawl. The reason why these two are really special and interesting to me right now is because they call for the use of mohair, and I am loving mohair right now. I want to use it in everything, and a lot of people are into it too. I know the ladies at Isabell Tricot use it all the time, stranding it in their garments, and it is like knitting with a cloud. And that was the reason why I picked up my first mohair project, which is this birds of a feather shawl. And before I get into that, I just want to mention that me and Naomi from at Knit the Sundown on Instagram, you should check her out. She's super cool, and she just finished her master's degree in knitwear design. And we decided to do this. I think she's making it's from Lane magazine. It's like this black with stranded with a white mohair. Anyway, it's beautiful. It's called like Ice or something. Yeah, so if you wanted to join us in that, it's very informal. It's just on Instagram. We're using the hashtag mohair everything. So feel free. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about my birds of a feather shawl right now. The reason why I started this was because I found it so interesting that this design by Andrea Mowry really challenges the notion that you can't mix different textures and different fibers together. And in fact, it actively mixes the same colorway on two different bases together. And I really like it because it creates this really super airy fabric that has a really cool feel to it. And yet, because of the colors, it's really still a cohesive fabric, one piece. And also, when I picked up the yarn for it, it was on my Labor Day weekend trip to Montreal, and I had ripped back my gallery cardigan for the third or fourth time, or second or third time, I don't know. I ripped it back a lot by then, and she and I were not on talking terms. So I decided I needed something that was easy, just garter stitch back and forth, and this was a perfect project for that. And even though it calls for the same colors in two different colorways, I decided actually to go with two silvers, but one of them had speckles, just for a little bit more interest. So these are hedgehog fibers in construct for the merino single ply, and the mohair is crystal. Yeah, I'm really excited to finish it and wear it. And I mentioned that a shawl is not really in my usual wheelhouse because I'm primarily a garment knitter. And in fact, once this is finished, this will be my first ever shawl. It may end up being my last one as well, because I know there's a lot of shawl designs out there. They all kind of look the same to me. And also I don't like doing garter stitch typically, and I don't like doing lace either. And those are a lot of different shawl designs, but you never know, maybe after I finish this one I'll be addicted, and I'll make all sorts of them. But for now, I think I'm going to stick with my garment knitting, and this Stockholm sweater is actually different than my typical garment knitting because I've been doing a lot of like heavy textured cable designs or color work. So this is my first kind of basic sweater that's kind of easy to accessorize, and it strands mohair, so it's fuzzy like a cloud, and I want to wear it all the time, so I'm really excited to finish it. What's special about that is I got the yarn for it from Unraveled in Perth. It was my first time visiting. The Almond Fiber Festival was last weekend in Almond, which is about a 40-minute drive outside of Ottawa, and I had a lot of fun walking through the marketplace, but it was a general textile event more so than just a knitting event like the Twist Fiber Festival was. So it was what my friend Sylvie, who actually gave me a ride out there, called a spinner's dream, but not so much a knitter's paradise, I guess. So maybe 1 out of every 3rd stall was knitting and related, and there was a lot of products versus actual materials in terms of knitting, or there's a lot of roving. Anyway, we ran out of things to talk about. Oh my gosh. We ran out of things to look at, so I didn't end up buying anything from the Almond Fiber Festival, and we decided actually while we were out there we should see what other local yarn stores were in the area. So that's how we ended up in Unraveled in Perth. Well, first we went to Carlton Place, to this place called Wool Store or something like that, which I thought, oh, wool store, that's perfect for me. And they did have a lot of local sheep products like sheepskin and all of that, which, side note, I didn't know they had to die for you to get sheepskin. But it was very soft, and I touched a sheepskin rug for a very long time, and Sylvie had to say, reassure me many times, yes, they're very, very dead. Especially the lamb skin. Anywho, but unfortunately the yarn they had there was actually all Barocco, which I feel like you can get anywhere, so I didn't end up picking up anything from there. But then I remembered Paige, who works at Wabi Sabi, the local yarn store here in Ottawa, mentioned that there was a really good yarn store in Perth, where she lives, and they had a good selection. So we decided while we were there, it was only about a 15-minute drive from where we were at Carlton Place at that time, so we decided to go, and it was gorgeous, beautiful, so much selection. Had Rowan, which I don't see very much in person, and we got there actually with half an hour left to go before the store was closed, so the owner was very generous. While I was being chatty Cathy, she was very patient and helped me pick out yarn. And originally I was going to do the Sleet pattern by Marie Wallin, which is a colorwork sweater, but also stranded with mohair, but it called for Rowan felted tweed and kid silkades, and altogether I think it ended up being like $450, which I was not ready to stomach at the time. Maybe not ever. So I decided instead to go with a more basic sweater, and I had just seen this Stockholm sweater and also the No Frills cardigan by Petite Knits, which uses 2 strands of mohair together, and I really love the look of it, although I thought 2 strands of mohair was a little bit much. So I loved this color from the Rowan Kidsville case, so I picked up this, and I just said to the store owner, I can't remember her name right now, but I said, just give me anything that would match this. So I ended up with the Manos del Paraguay Alegria in Stratus, and it's this beautiful blue, and actually I was so excited to cast it on. Sylvie was driving in the car, and I had the sun blocker down, and I had the skein hanging over it, and I was winding it in the car on our way back to Elmont, because I was staying there overnight with a friend who had just moved out there. So then yeah, I finished winding it right before we got to the restaurant for dinner, and I started knitting it right away in the restaurant, which was a bit difficult because Sylvie would be talking to me, and I'm like counting stitches, and I'm like, oh god, I lost count. And then actually we ran into another knitter who didn't bring her knitting, so she walked in and she was like, oh my god, how could you guys? And so it was funny, and we chatted with her for a bit, and but yeah, it didn't help with the counting of stitches. I counted it's an interesting construction for the Stockholm sweater. You knit the top of the back to the bottom of the arms, and then you pick up the stitches and knit the shoulders with some short row shaping so the back is higher, and then you knit down to the front, join it for the chest area. I'll show you on the actual sweater, that may be easier. And then you knit down to the arms, and then you join it together and you knit to the bottom. So I ended up finishing the whole back piece, I think, by the end of the week, and so yeah, I knitted super quick, and I finished the body. I bought it on last Saturday, so I finished the body pretty much within a week, although to be fair, I've been sick since Wednesday. I'm feeling better now, and so I had a lot of knitting time while I was staying home from work. But yeah, it was like a very quick knit. I feel like even though it's a basic design, I can do 10 million more of them, and I might even hazard into doing 2 strands of mohair now that I found out that Lichen and Lace, who's a beautiful dyer out in New Brunswick, I believe in Sackville, or no, in Nova Scotia, excuse my, pardon my geography there. So she's the Canadian dyer out in the Maritimes, and she does these beautiful, like, earthy, I just think of an enchanted forest when I see a lot of her colorways. So yeah, now that I know she does hand-dyed mohair, I might spring for another, maybe a more interesting 2-stranded mohair in another, either the no frills, because I'm finishing in Stockholm, maybe I need a different project, so maybe the no frills in her mohair. Or alternatively, the Cozy Posy yarn also does some beautiful mohair colors. There's like a beautiful like rose, like faded rose color, or winter rose it was. And then also a the faded rose is from Lichen and Lace. So anyway, yeah, super into mohair right now, and that's pretty much what I wanted to talk to you about for today. I did finish my babble hat last night, very late last night. Stayed up late knitting, and it's just drying right now because I gave it a quick wash. So I'm gonna put the palm on and I'll show you the finished object maybe tomorrow. Okay, bye. Friends, it's Monday and I finished my babble hat. It's really hot, so I'm gonna take it off now, but it's the cutest thing I've ever seen. All of these sheep, and it reminds me of a sweatshirt that I saw last week, which had a bunch of different cats of different shapes and sizes on it, and it said body diversity on it. I really wanted to buy it, but I think it was like 50 bucks for a sweatshirt, so I couldn't manage to stomach that. And actually today I have very exciting delivery. It is my order from Lichen and Lace. I bought a sweater quantity in order to make the Rose cardigan. And don't know if I mentioned, but I'm actually on a bit of a yarn diet right now because I'm planning on going to the Edinburgh Yarn Festival in March. So this is going to be my last yarn purchase for a little while. So I'm just going to pull it open and show you what I've got. Ooh. Look at this. It's so cute. So I got the Faded Rose Marsh Mohair and her new Rustic Sport Base, just in the snow color. And I was inspired by Camille, who I met 2 weeks ago in Montreal. She had her Rose cardigan, which she didn't do a fade, and she held a strand of mohair through it, and I thought this would make such a, and it made actually it made a really gorgeous sweater. She just posted it on her Instagram. And it's like white with a little bit of fuzz to it. It looks so cozy and it's exactly what I wanted. So I'm kind of copying her idea with this kind of pinkish, yellowish mohair. And I also don't usually like using superwash, so I'm decided instead to use this sport weight rustic yarn, which is 100% Canadian wool. So yeah, this will end up being probably a New Year's Day cast on, because I promised my friend Kristen that I was gonna finish all of my whips before I started the Rose Cardigan, because she had planned on doing it as well. And she said she needed some time in order to gather her materials and get through some of her whips. So, but all of that to say, I have about 7 sweater projects on the go, so it's not going to be very quick, even though I consider myself a fast knitter. So yeah, I'm planning for a New Year's Day cast on, and hopefully that means I'll have it for my trip to Scotland and the Edinburgh Yarn Festival. Hi friends, it's Tuesday, and I come to you today a little bit hat in hand to tell you about all the things that I have not finished and kind of abandoned, because even though I like to have 20 million whips at a time, I'm actually pretty monogamous. Like, I pick up one thing and I'll knit on that straight for several hours, and I'll pick up another, and I get sort of obsessive for a week or so, and then I put it down and I kind of move on and forget about it, because I have a lot of cast on momentum and beginning momentum. Finishing is not my strong suit, because there's so many things that I want to make. So I'm gonna talk to you about my whips, because I'm going to use you all to keep me in line in a project I'm gonna call #CrackTheWhips. So I'm gonna show you the 7 or 8 projects that I have that I want to finish by the end of this year. And exchange, Christine, once I finish all of these, you have to start the Rose Cardigan with me. So the first thing that I'll talk to you about is this Silver Forest sweater. So I think this is the longest outstanding, actually, out of all the things I'm going to show you. So this one I feel most guilty about. This was actually a test knit for the designer, Jennifer Steingass, and she posted a picture of this yoke, and I thought it was so beautiful, and it actually is inspired by the Shetlands, which I hope to go to one year, and actually the Shetland Wool Festival is on right now. Shetland Wool Week is on right now. The deadline for this, I think it was maybe a month or 3 weeks to finish. It was in January when she did the call out, and I was so excited to knit it, and I did the yoke in a couple of days, and then I did the body on my trip to Quebec City, and I have posted all sorts of beautiful pictures of this yoke in progress. And then I didn't make it. I got to the bottom of the body 2 days into my trip to Belgium in February. And on my trips, I tend to not have a lot of relaxing time. Oftentimes when I come home, I need a vacation from my vacations, because I treat every place that I go to like a grand adventure, and like I'll never be there again. So I try to see as much as possible. So there was not a lot of time to sit and knit, but I did have one of my favorite photos of me ever, which was me knitting this sweater on a train in Belgium going from Ghent to Bruges. So I did post lots of pictures, so I hope that was helpful to Jennifer. even though I didn't actually end up finishing it. And I learned from that I shouldn't be a test knitter. I know lots of people are really excited to do it and they think of it maybe as a chance to get a free pattern, but it's really something that's critical to independent designers as part of their process, and I feel really bad that I didn't finish it. So I did get to the bottom of the body, but since I missed the deadline and by the time I got home I was distracted by other things, so actually I'm still missing the sleeves. So I'm hoping to have the sleeves done. This is the first project that I'm going to take on because it needs to be done. And I think it'll be cool to have to wear when I'm in Scotland, since the yoke is inspired by Shetland, which is the islands on the north of Scotland. Yeah, so that's whip number 1. Actually, this is another Jennifer Steingass pattern, which I also didn't do the sleeves for. This is the Treysta. Actually, maybe I started this one earlier then, because I remember I still had my Christmas decorations up, so I may have even started it last year. The reason why I stopped being so excited about this is I realized as I finished the body that I didn't know what color dominance was, and I know there's a few schools of thought, or two. You think color dominance exists or it doesn't. And I think, based on my now experience doing stranded color work, that it really makes colors pop when you hold the dominant color in your left hand and your background color in your right. I mean, it looks different to me. So, and I don't, that's pretty much it. I have nothing much more to say about that. The other thing is it is made out of that Lopi. It's meant to be an outer layer, but working on it when it's sitting directly against bare skin is not particularly fun, and it's been kind of much too warm to be curled up with a layer on top of me with this sitting in my lap. So I hope to pick this up soon. There's another hesitation I have with it, is I don't necessarily think I like this blue color, and I don't know if it stands out enough from the gray color that it's against either. But I did have a friend who said she really, really liked it, so maybe all those things that I don't like about it would actually make this a really good gift for her. So, whip number 2. I might have a bit of snifflies because I stirred up a lot of dust to pull all of these whips out. Number 3 is the Kiuru sweater. It is by somebody whose name I don't recall, but I'll put on the screen. It has a lovely faux cable up the front, and it was top down raglan shaping, and with some stitch. And I'm using Knit Pick Stroll tweed sock, which has great stitch definition, and is actually lovely, very lovely and soft. And I am very excited to wear this. I just got stuck on Sleeve Island and abandoned ship. I don't know. That's not a very good metaphor, but that is whip number 3. Number 4, this is the Kiuru sweater. A lot of these actually come out of Lane magazine, which is one of my favorite publications. This I love, and I spend a lot of time working on it back in April, but I just put it down for some reason. I think it was just that I find cables kind of boring sometimes. I don't know why. I know some people find it, because most of the time the way I knit cables is I memorize the stitches, or I memorize generally what it should look like, and then I read the stitches underneath to determine when to do the next cable. So it got kind of repetitive, and I think that's why I stopped, but it does make this beautiful texture, and again the tweed adds a really lovely effect to it. And another thing that would be great to wear, it is also in fingering weight, so it is taking a very long time on top because of the cabling, and it's just every stitch is taking a lot longer to do. But I think it'll be a really good addition, and this color is kind of out of my comfort zone. Green is not something I usually go for. I'm usually in the sort of blues range, although recently I've been kind of into yellows, but I don't really own anything in the green, so this would be a good addition. It was originally knitted in the flat, but I don't like knitting flat. So instead I've added a selvage stitch in between where the pieces are, and what I'm gonna do is reinforce those seams afterwards. So doing it in the round just makes it a little bit quicker and you're not going back and forth, but I'm still going to do the sewing part, which makes garments really tailored and keep its shape over time. That's whip number 4, I think. Number 5 is this teeny tiny baby sweater, which I think would only take me a day to finish the sleeves for, but it just hasn't been happening. This is a design by a lovely lady out of Faroe Islands. I'll put the name of the pattern and designer here, but I love the way it kind of looks like almost like a fade, but in color work. And this is a really soft, I think it's called Alpaca Cloud or something like that, or no, Wonder Fluff. And it's a beautiful fabric, and I think it would be a lovely outer layer because it's very tightly knit for a little baby. And whip number, I don't know, 6. This is one sleeve of the Finch sweater by Wallin, who is my favorite designer, but me and her have kind of a love-hate relationship because I'm not a fan sometimes of the way that she writes, but she does make beautiful designs. So this is one of the sleeves. I decided I would be good and start with the sleeves first, but evidently doing one of the sleeves made me bored and I stopped doing it. But I really like the way that it combines it has a base color, and then you do little charts and little period charts, and then a larger motif, and then back to the period charts and the larger motif. And then you just actually repeat this pattern until you get the length that you would like. I remember why now that I didn't actually, that just remembered why I stopped. Because this particular chart, which actually is my favorite look, has several rows of managing 3 colors at once. So it was a little bit frustrating to do, but I think the overall effect is beautiful. So I'm hoping that I'll have this done soon to be able to wear, hopefully this winter season. Finally, the one that's been sitting in my lap, love of my life, the bane of my existence, my Mount Everest. This is the Orkney cardigan. It is a design also by Wallin, and it has the worst chart I have ever seen in my life. Even though they published an errata, which fixed the problems where you can't see the bars in between the charts, it doesn't solve the fact that it is also the teeniest chart I've ever seen. And on top of that, it is written to be knitted in the flat, even though it has 12 colors. Which I think actually would have made it more manageable because I had to carry around all 12. No, you would have had to carry all 12 colors with you to do all the little pieces. So I recharted this whole cardigan, but for some reason the numbers didn't work. And then
I just rewrote, basically the only thing I kept was the charts. I rewrote this whole pattern because I didn't like the bottom rib, which was a two-tone rib. You do this camel color and then you mix the purple in. I thought that looked funny, so I made it shorter and just the camel color. And I added steeks to avoid having to knit color work in the flat. So I did steeks up the middle, steeks for the neck hole, steeks for the armhole, and those are all the steeks. The part that I'm now stuck on is I have realized from reading the pattern descriptions from other people who have done this pattern, the arms, the charts are not the same as the body. It's the same motifs, but with the colors backwards, I think, in some cases, or just differently arranged. So because the chart was so awful, I'm gonna have to end up recharting it, and I'm also trying to figure out how I want to do the sleeves. If I wanted to knit it in the round until like you get to the sleeve, the set-in sleeve cap, or I might do some short row shaping in order to just do it top down. I haven't decided yet. I think it would be way too complicated. It would be more complicated to do the short row shaping for top down set-in sleeves than it would be to knit ferrule in the flat. I just pulled up actually the chart that I redid for it. I'm not going to zoom in obviously because I don't want to give away the actual pattern. But yeah, it was very colorful, and I ended up just plucking in each of the repeats on XL, and then I ended up adding waist shaping because I like to make my own life difficult, and so I added the waist shaping into the chart as well, and actually it fits pretty well. I don't know if I can get it over myself because I only cut one of the steeks so far, and I haven't cut the center one yet, but if this is ever finished, it will be my most treasured possession, but I don't quite think I'm emotionally prepared to do another repeat of the charting right now. But there you go. So those are all of my whips that I have to show you, and I'm hoping that after I clear out some of my mohair projects that are currently on the needles, I'm gonna get to finishing some of those and have lots of finished objects photos for everyone to see, because some of them are really, really beautiful, and I don't know why I'm such a brat and I didn't finish them whenever some of them are so close. I think I'll leave it at that for today. I'm gonna see you tomorrow for another topic, which I haven't quite decided on yet. But hopefully it'll be interesting, and hopefully this whole week has been interesting so far. Bye! Hi friends! It's Wednesday, and I am coming to you from my apartment that's finally not too hot. I am wearing the Wintersole sweater by Jennifer Steingass. It was my first cast on of the year, I believe, and it was so quick. I think I did it in exactly a month because it's 2 strands of fingering weight held double, so you can also use a worsted weight. Excuse me, I'm sniffly again. I have really bad allergies to dust, and I went and pulled out actually my 2 of my very early projects that I still had with me. I thought it would be cool to show you and tell you a little bit about how I got started in all of this knitting business. Not business, because I hate to do it for fun. Yeah, so I thought that would be fun because it is my first episode, and I don't think I've spent a lot of time introducing myself. I kind of jumped right into what projects I was working on and all of that.
I've been a knitter now for, I think, at least 10 years, and I crocheted for 15 because I remember being 5 years old and learning how to do just a rectangle, well, more of a wavy design with my grandmother, and that's a really fond memory that I now hold on to because this grandmother has passed away a few years ago. So yeah, I just remember her teaching me how to crochet, and that's what started all of this fiber stuff. I don't really crochet very much anymore. I did kind of addictively, like now I would, Christy Glass Knits always says this is a lifestyle knitting, and I think crochet was my lifestyle before it became all a thing. It was all I would do. I would go to school, I would come home, I would knit, and I would crochet for hours. I remember it was like I was like 8 or 9 or 10 years old and crocheting until 2 or 3 in the morning, and the house would be dark, and I would be crocheting in my parents' basement, and I was terrified of the basement. And for some reason I thought if I moved as little as possible, the monsters in the dark wouldn't get me. And then I remember, so 2 or 3 in the morning, I was exhausted. I had made progress on, I used to make a lot of those amigurumis out of crochet, so little toys. I remember just like putting it down and then walking up to the light and then hitting it and running up the stairs, because you have to get up the stairs before it got dark in order to escape the monsters. Yeah. It all makes sense, and I still think I do that because I'm still a little bit scared of being in dark places. But yeah, but what made me stop crocheting as much and start picking up knitting was that I would crochet, and then my hands would get extremely cramped up and painful, but because knitting was a slightly different motion, I could always knit. So knitting was my backup whenever my hands would hurt too much from doing all the crocheting. So I don't distinctly remember how I learned knitting. I think I taught myself from a book, because I knit continental style, and it's a very similar motion to crocheting. So it's, you know, when you crochet, you kind of go in and out like this, and so with picking, you're picking the yarn like this. So it was crochet without the pain, and so whenever crocheting would get too painful, I would pick up a knitting. But I finished a lot of crochet projects really fast, but I never finished any of my knitting projects. And actually, I don't think I knew how to knit properly. Like, I would twist stitches, and I didn't actually know the difference between a stocking knit and a purl, and I think I just did things. I would look a stitch up whenever it came up in a pattern. I would learn how to do it, and then I would just do it the way I generally remembered it being. And so and it didn't matter because I didn't finish anything, because I would get halfway through and then rip it out and start the new thing. But doing that, so where I was getting these patterns from was this like really weird website called like freenknittingpatterns.com, or like, and there was another one called like 5,000 free knitting patterns. So this was in 2007, 2008, shortly before Ravelry became extremely popular, and the amazing tool that it is today. Find me, Books and Cables, on there. But I would always be Googling free knitting patterns, and doing those searches, I think I eventually came upon Ravelry, and I remember checking it and being frustrated because I couldn't sign up for it for months and months, until finally I joined in September 2008, around there. Excuse me, I'm really sorry about the sniffles. I have really bad allergies. And yeah, so I would try these free patterns, learn some new stitches, but never finish a single thing. Then I think, I don't remember a time where I wasn't knitting, so I knitted
from sort of knitted and crochet, so I kind of merged these memories together because I just had yarn and I was doing whatever I was doing with it. So I was knitting and crocheting from when I was 5, and then maybe I learned how to knit when I was 10, and then I just did it throughout high school, and it was one of those things that I knew was kind of weird, but I loved to do, and it made me so calm and relaxed. I was extremely anxious all the way through growing up, and I think that has a lot to do with the fact that my family moved from Taiwan to Canada when I was 7 or 8, and then even before that we had moved, so I moved houses basically every 3 to 5 years, so I never really had a settled group of friends, and even if I did, I would lose contact with them the next time I moved. So I don't remember a time where I wasn't knitting. It was the same with books. It was knitting and books, and knitting, crocheting, and books. Those were the 3 constants throughout my life, because we had moved so much, and you know, I had learned English from reading, because I couldn't communicate, but I could sit there and slowly figure out what the words mean. So I learned English extremely quickly because I spent so many hours reading. And then I learned how to knit and crochet because it was a solitary activity that I was doing in front of a computer, because I used to watch a lot of TV shows on the internet. I was a pretty early adopter, I think, of the internet. Like, I was on it from the age of 7 and 8, and then I would just watch TV all the time on it, and it was something I did in front of the computer as I was watching all of these shows. And so I don't really remember a time when I wasn't knitting. And I remember making those little amigurumi toys through high school, and I would post a picture of it on Facebook, and I would ask my friends to name it in exchange for the toy. And actually in grade 12, I did you have to do volunteer hours. So for my volunteer hours, I worked with my friend who did a lot of sewing, and we had a little booth on Kids Day at the farmers market. So we sold we had a booth for $5, and we sold our little accessories that we made. This is in grade 12, so it's not as cute as it sounds. So grade 12 was what? I was 17, 18 years old. So everyone else was kids. And then there was me and Sharon, who was sitting there basically adults, being look at our stuff, buy our stuff. And then there was the girls next to us who were 12 years old. They were look, we made little charms. And everyone would buy stuff from them, and then and kind of look at our stuff and be wow, you made these, wow, very cool. And then no one bought. No, Sharon sold a lot of stuff, but no one liked my crochet stuff. Whatever. And then I don't remember a time when I wasn't knitting, but never finished anything until, so actually Sharon was super into Doctor Who, so I didn't watch Doctor Who at the time, but I saw that there was this Doctor Who scarf on Ravelry, and I thought I was really into these super lengthy warm scarves, so that was actually one of the first projects I've ever finished. And then I have it here with me. I brought it all the way with me so I grew up in Vancouver on the west coast of Canada, and now I'm in Ottawa, which is kind of just past the middle. So we're through all the prairies, and then actually I'm in Quebec. So Ottawa is right on the border of Ontario and Quebec. So above, kind of, I don't know, Ontario's above Michigan sort of area, a little bit further east of that. So I brought this with me because it was one of my first projects that I've ever finished. And it's not actually wearable, but I thought, it's such a long scarf, I can wrap it around myself several times, because I was coming from Vancouver and we only got little drizzles in the winter time, and now I was facing -40, real Canadian weather. So I thought this scarf would be really helpful, and I've never worn it a single time because I'm short and this is 10 feet long. And I can't walk without tripping over myself. But I guess if you wrapped it around like this, it's super warm. And it is made out of acrylic, which doesn't breathe very well, which I think some people say is a bad thing, but when you're trying to keep in all the heat you can, the plastic is like putting bubble wrap on yourself. So it is quite warm. Yeah, and I made these little tassels at the bottom. I'm not sure if it's accurate to the show. I do like the show and I watch it a lot now, but I have never gone back to the old Doctor Who episodes. And you know, the fact that I called it a Doctor Who scarf probably really irritated some people. And the other thing that I finished for the first time, so both of these were made during high school, probably around grade 11, 12. And this is my Gryffindor scarf, which I'm not sure why I made, because I remember making a point of being like, I'm different. Everyone wants to be a Gryffindor, but I'm not a Gryffindor. But I guess I just wanted it to be recognizable. So I made myself a Gryffindor scarf. And I remember buying one and being very unsatisfied with it because the official merchandise, I actually can't hear myself talk. This gives me an echo. This is also out of probably some Lyons brand acrylic yarn, so it's like having a plastic layer blocking out all sound. I remember buying one of those official ones, and they were so thin and they weren't satisfying, and I just wanted one of the scarves that I saw Harry wearing in the movies, you know, those giant big scarves. You know, I don't know why knitted stuff now doesn't have the same, like, the commercial stuff doesn't have the same luscious, like, bulky feeling, which is why I like a lot of hand knits, because you get this, like, full-bodied knitted look, which was why I started making this. And I did it in double knitting. No, actually, no. I started it in double knitting, and then I got really bored that you had to do 2 passes in order to get 1 full row. So then I figured out how to use circular needles, and then I just did these circular, and it went super quick, actually. Both of these went super quick. I think this one went fast. No, both of these went fast because you only have to do 20 before you switch colors, and this one was kind of like an odd number. Oh, there's a hole here. No, that's not because something bit it. There's no holes anywhere else. What was I talking about? And this one had an uneven, like an odd number of rounds for every color, so it was something to look forward to every time. So these were super quick projects. I think I made them within a couple of weeks. Like, this might have been a 2 weeks project. I'm not even kidding. But I did it for hours. Like, I don't know how I did this, but I used to do 2 things. I would pick up a book from the library, and then I would read it in one night. I remember, even if I had to stay up until 3 or 4 in the morning, I was determined to read the book through one night. And same for this. I had that sort of one more row thing. So I finished these 2 things. Well, this one I think took me several months, but this I think I finished in like 2 weeks. It was fast. And then I took it to my friend Sharon, who was obsessed with Doctor Who. And she, like, refused to return it to me. She, like, had it, she wore it for the whole day through, like, several blocks of classes. And then I got to university, and I don't think I stopped knitting, because I just remembered now, as I was telling you that story, that I, led the Stitch-a-Bitch group at the women's club for a really long time. And that's where I learned that I am not good at teaching knitting. Like, I don't have the patience for it. I like sharing my knitting knowledge with people who already knit, but like, I'm not good at teaching beginners. Like, I don't know how to articulate it because I've been knitting for so long that it's just how I do it. So I don't have a memory of being taught, and I don't remember not knowing, and I don't remember how I explained it to myself so that it made sense. It was like, at that point, it was muscle memory for me, so having to articulate how to do stitch didn't make sense to me. So I was not very good at it, but that was my regular knitting. That was my first knit night that I have ever been to. And that's when I started to realize, like, you know, it's not just the weird thing that I did. You know, there was a community out there. And at this point, it was just, you know, a stitch and bitch, which I think was still more like people casually dropping into. It wasn't like it is now, where there's an online community and there's a whole lifestyle with it, different bags you can purchase, accessory you can buy, all of these things that go with it. But it made me sort of rediscover Ravelry again and realize, like, it wasn't the Ravelry that I had been on when I was 11 or 12 and just looking for any free pattern to try. Yeah, and then I was making still really basic stuff. Like, I made lots of headbands, lots of hats. I always had a hat on the go. I don't really have any of these things anymore because I think I often gave them away. And also I had a hard time finishing things. So I would cast on tons of things and then never finish them. Which is still the case to this day, but I'm a little bit better at actually doing projects now. Ever since I actually started knitting sweaters. So actually how I got into sweaters and color work specifically. I think it was 3rd or 4th year university. I think I was going through like a pretty hard time. Like, I was in a long-term relationship for almost a year and a half, and after that ended, I was kind of at a loss of what, because you don't realize how much a relationship takes up of your time, which I think is worth it while it's happening, but you kind of realize suddenly you have all of this free time after you're kind of by yourself again. And I was in the relationship all through my university, so I never really found myself as an adult until that ended, and then I had to sort of figure out who I was as a person who was independent from my family, because I went from being a person who I had my family, and then I went to first year university. I spent it floating. I was extremely, I think I was homesick, and I didn't realize it at the time, because I thought, you know, I don't need my family. I'm gonna do it on my own. And I think I spent a lot of that first year just, like, in retrospect, being very depressed. And I spent a lot of time in bed sleeping because I was just exhausted all the time. Especially that first winter in Ottawa, it was tough because Vancouver, you get drizzles, right? It's one of my teachers used to say, it's like Chinese water torture. It's enough to just keep tapping, 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 but it was never enough enough to drive you insane, but never enough that you needed like an umbrella or anything, or it was cold or whatever. So when I came to Ottawa that first winter, it was tough, like -40. So I went from my family's house to a year of just being unmoored and not knowing who I was, and then I went into a relationship and I began to define myself by the relationship. So I kind of lost sight of who I was along the way. And so then I was alone, and then I saw on Instagram, because I was like, during that period of time I also got really into fountain pens. And then so I found this whole online community. That was my first insight into like what an online community could be, where you have this sort of connecting thing and you're all just as crazy about it, and you meet sort of all sorts of cool people that you wouldn't normally meet in regular life. So, but I think the memories of that was so connected to that previous relationship that when it stopped, I kind of didn't want to do it anymore. And then I kind of I never stopped knitting, but I didn't do it as much because I had to choose my time. I got into all of this journaling stuff, calligraphy and all of that. And then now I didn't really want to do that anymore. And so but I was on and I think I was on my like fountain pen account, which I don't go on anymore. But it was super cool. Like I think I had like almost 9,000 followers on that account. I was posting every day with the pictures of my pretty pens and things like that. I remember on that account, and then I saw someone who had a knitting bullet journal that she was using her fountain pen in, and then I sort of like, it kind of clicked like, hey, if there was this fountain pen community, and I know about Ravelry, I've been on it for years, I know there's a community there, obviously there's a knitting community on Instagram. And then I started following a few of the people and a few of the tags, and then I saw my first yoke sweater. I've never seen knitting like that before, and I went from having never finished a project, being on Scarf Island, and then I decided I'm gonna need to make one of those. So I just found knit picks because I had no money. I was a student. Found knit picks. I found that they $1.99 for Wool of the Andes worsted weight, which is exactly what I needed for the Sundaughter by Diana Wallin. I showed you a picture of my mom wearing it earlier in this episode. And so I made it. It was the first garment I ever made. And it was like yeah, this is it. I've done it my whole life, and I don't know why I ever stopped. So I don't know how long that took. Not very long. I did one, and then I finished the Sundaughter, and I remember wearing it the following January. So July was kind of when I started this whole like end of the relationship, and then finding myself again, and then my camera blinked at me because I think I talked for way too long. So I had anyway, I didn't test my gauge for my Sundaughter, so it didn't really fit. It was a bit short. So, but I ignored that because I was so proud. It was my first sweater. And then I wanted to do another one. So I did another knit picks order, and then I took the same math as this sweater, which I loved, and then I did, I picked out a yoke that I saw a picture of that I really wanted, and so that was my first like kind of foray into sort of design, which is like piecemealing a pattern that I knew worked with the design that I wanted. And I no longer have either of those sweaters. So the first one, the Sundaughter, gave to my mom because she's she's like smaller than me, so it fit her a lot better. And then actually the next sweater I made was a bit too big, and I ran out of yarn before I got to the top. So then it was very drop shoulder, and then I was wearing it for a while. I was convincing myself that it was fine. And then I was like, no, it's basically hanging off of me. So I ended up giving it to my friend, who it fits a lot better. So I don't have any of those anymore, but I was like, I love this. I have to do color work, everything. And I don't remember what I worked on, but I think I just did a lot of things that just didn't stick for a while. And then this winter time, when again, I think it's just winter, it gets me really, seasonal effects gets me pretty badly, and so that's when I start convincing myself to pick up all sorts of different hobbies. And so around Christmas time, I cast on the Treysta sweater, the Birkin, I did the Birkin in last September. Yeah, I think I was itching to do a colorwork sweater ever since I finished the two that I did at the beginning of the year. And then, so that I think was right in my very last year of university. And then university kind of kicked me in the ass. And so I didn't knit for a while, or I did, but I didn't finish anything. And then that May I graduated, and then I started working full time immediately after. I was very lucky. And so I didn't really stick to anything. And then finally I saw the Birkin sweater, and like it captured me just like that Sundaughter did, the very first colorwork sweater. And I was like, I need this. And then I found out it was in Lane magazine, and I was so mad about that because I was like, I have to pay $50 for a magazine just for this. And then the more I saw it, the more pictures I saw of it, the more I was like, I need it. And then no one had the first, I think it was in the first edition of Lane magazine, or the second, and it was out of print everywhere because it just went crazy as soon as I hit the internet. And so I looked everywhere. I finally found it, I think from Unit 2, and in Toronto, and then I bought it, and then I went on my trip back to Taiwan for the first time in 10 years. So I didn't get to knit it, but I was in Taiwan and I was still thinking about this pattern. I remember doing an order from Knit Picks again in my house in an Airbnb in Kaohsiung, and I was like, I'm gonna start that as soon as I get back to Canada. And I did, and I finished the Birkin. I think I did the yoke in like a day because I was so excited, and it was top down, so you get to do the fun part first. And the other two sweaters I did before had been bottom up, so I was really excited to do this top down sweater. And then what was I? Where was I going with this? So yeah, I had my Birkin sweater, and then I just am in love with colorwork. After I did the Birkin sweater, I cast on the Treysta, which is another Lane magazine pattern. So after being very resentful of Lane magazine for having proprietary patterns, then I discovered I love this magazine and all of the patterns in it. I had to have all of them. So actually I do have a good collection of Lane magazine, which I can show you at another time. And cast on the Treysta, never finished the sleeve. Cast on this Wintersole, finished it in a month, so that was pretty good going. And then cast on the Silver Forest, didn't finish the arms, and you know how the story is, and that's where we are today. That's my whole knitting journey. I don't know if a lot of it made sense. I'm getting progressively more in an allergy haze as I tell this story, and I feel like I've been going for a very long time. So this might be an extremely long episode, clearly, because my camera cut me off. But, so I think I actually might call it a week at this point. I announced that this episode would be going out on Friday, and I think that is going to be my schedule going forward. I'm not sure if the format's going to stick. I did like that it was a little bit more manageable in terms of editing and finding recording time, because I just had to find 5 to 10 minutes a day. Well, today I had to make maybe 20-30 minutes, but I just had to find 5 minutes a day to record, so I really like that. But I think there's a potential that it could turn out to be choppy, so we'll see. I haven't watched the whole thing together to see if it makes sense and if I like it. But you know what? I'm not worried about it. If it works, it works. If it doesn't, we'll change it up. There's no rules, and we're making it up as we go. So thank you very much if you made it all the way to this point. I'm not sure if any other episode will be as long as this one. This one was accidentally this long because I decided to tell you my whole freaking life story. I thought I was going to do a quick, yeah, I was little, I knitted through my whole life, and then it went off in whatever direction. So thank you for sticking around if you did. If you wanted to follow me, find me on the internet. You can find me as Books and Cables on both Ravelry and Instagram. I'm most active on Instagram. Annoyingly active, one might say. I'd be happy to have you join me. Thank you for coming by. If you're in the Ottawa area, I hope to see you at one of the knit nights. We have one here in Hull every night in the Quebec side. And Wabi Sabi has a knit night every other Thursday, starting tomorrow, Thursday, which is too late for you because I'm posting this on Friday. So yeah, I would be happy to knit with any one of you, and I hope you have great success in all of your projects this week, and I hope to see you again very soon. Bye!